Hi everybody and welcome to question and answer session number 2. But before I begin with the questions, and there's many of them this time, I'm going to give you a little update about my life. Well, I'm over my little rush with school now. I finally submitted my paper to a conference. I still don't know if it's going to make it in or not, but I'll find out in December. I also submitted my PhD funding applications, but I won't know until May if I get the funding or not. So right now I'm back to working on my thesis and finishing my last course for my master's degree, and things are a bit more relaxed. I'm able to see my girlfriend more often, which is great. And well, I'm trying not to stress because there's always something stressful in my life, I find. These days I've begun doing research into contacting a surgeon for a facial feminization surgery. There's a few that I'm thinking of contacting, namely Dr. Zukowski and Dr. Proscar, as well as Dr. Bensman here in Montreal. And I'm going to take some time to do some research into that, see what's most convenient to me. I'd like for price not to be the main concern because I really want to get quality work done. I know some people are going to suggest that maybe I should go to Thailand because they have surgery for cheap there, but personally I'd rather get it done close to home if possible. So we'll see how that goes. I've also been planning a little party evening on Halloween with Erin. So we're going to go to a party with some of her friends, and then we're going to go to a nightclub to dance all night. And she's going to dress sexy, which is something she doesn't do very often. But I've been encouraging her to be a little less shy. And yeah, I'm going to dress as like a sexy vampire goth type thing, which I guess is not very defined, but I hope it's going to be fun. I bought myself some vampire fangs on eBay. These are supposed to be the higher quality ones. I had some bad experience with the cheap ones that won't really stick in the past, but we'll see how this goes. Apart from that, I seem to have a cold. I have sore throat right now, but I guess I feel okay. And some very good news for me. I've been able to talk to one of the owners of a local compounding pharmacy, and it seems like I might be able to get hormones by injection after all. And it won't be super expensive. It'll be something like $15 to $25 per month. So as soon as I can see my doctor, I'm going to get a prescription for that, go back to the compounding pharmacy and try to order it, and hopefully this time it'll work out. And if I can get it, hormones by injection are pretty much the safest and most effective form of estrogen, so that would be great. So now, on to the questions. Like I said, people have been sending many more this time, but they're quite interesting for the most part, I think. So let us begin. Okay, so somebody is asking, I'm going to be taking spironolactone, estrogen. I will start later, but I wanted to ask your opinion on this. Do you think that other people that see me on a regular basis will be able to notice I am changing, or are the effects subtle enough that people won't question me? If it helps at all, I'm 16. I'm not really sure if I will really appear different to other people considering the fact that I won't be taking estrogen. Okay. Well, personally, first of all, I don't recommend that you take an anti-androgen without estrogen, because if you're blocking your testosterone and you're not taking estrogen, you're putting yourself at risk of osteoporosis, and you might find that your metabolism is lacking hormonal stimulation. You might find you have dry skin, that you're very tired, etc. And you might also get brittle nails, and like I said, risk of osteoporosis in the long term, and basically breakable hair, all of those problems. So I don't really recommend you do that to begin with, at least not for more than a few months at most. Beyond that, if you take an anti-androgen, it is possible that you're going to have some slight feminization. One of the most common side effects of anti-androgens is small amount of breast growth in males. Men who take anti-androgens for prostate cancer commonly have this, and people might be able to tell. Obviously, it won't be as visible as if you were taking estrogen, and it'll probably take several months before people really start noticing something. And if they notice something, if they notice that your face is changing slightly and stuff like that, they might not make the connection, so it won't be clear to them. But seriously, if you're 16 and you're about to start hormones, I strongly advise that you make sure that once you start hormones, you're never gonna stop, because getting on and off the hormones, it's not good for you. And I also advise that you get estrogen, even if it's a very low dose, even if it's only 2 milligrams a day. I advise you get some, because it's going to be better for your health, I think. And also, obviously, you'll get much more feminization with estrogen. Then again, I also think you should probably be out to your parents if you're living with them, because these kinds of things never work. I constantly hear about teenagers who are trying to hide this from their parents. You won't be able to hide it for very long, and if you think they won't be happy when they find out, and it's not going to make your life simpler, it's going to make things more complicated for you. So, please think about this. Probably you should tell them, you should make sure that you have stable source of income, so you can, like I said, never have to stop the hormones. Okay, next question. Do you think there's a chance you could ever have a heterosexual relationship with a man, or would you consider yourself 100% lesbian? So I'm guessing this question was sent by a man. Well, as you know, I have a girlfriend right now. I'm not available. Sorry. But I don't know. Maybe. I'm not the kind of person who will say, oh, I'll never do this, I'll never do that. So maybe I could end up with a man someday. I'm not, completely close to that kind of possibility. But at this time, I'm not really considering it, because, to be honest, it's never the case that I see a man and I find him, physically attractive. So the chances of me ending up with a man, I think, are pretty slim. Okay, so next question. An online pharmacy charges a lot for Proscar. What anti-androgen do you use? Well, first of all, I'm going to point out that Proscar is not a real anti-androgen. What it does is it blocks the conversion of testosterone into one of the two types of DHT, dihydrotestosterone, which are the most active forms of it. So Proscar will help reduce the risk of hair loss, and it will also reduce body hair growth and things like that. But it's not going to be very efficient, unless you're taking a very strong estrogen like injections. It's not a good estrogen to transition with. Personally, at this time, I'm taking Casodax as an anti-androgen. I like it because it has very little side effects for me, but I don't think it's the most effective one. The most common and most effective anti-androgens are probably spironolactone and androcure. I think you'll find androcure has less side effects than spironolactone. So I advise you try one of those two, and you find whichever one suits you best. Try them for, 2 weeks, a month each, and decide on one of those two. But Proscar for transition, probably not, unless you're taking a very high dose of injections and you want to, to transition slowly, maybe, because some people want to do that, then it's understandable. Okay. Do you get lab tests to measure the effects of your hormones on your body, like kidney, liver function tests? Well, kidney and liver function tests are mostly to make sure that the hormones aren't damaging to your body. Yes, I do get those tests. My doctor makes me take them every time I see him, and so far all the results have turned out normal, healthy, And if you are on hormones, you should probably consider getting a doctor, and getting those kinds of tests also to make sure that you're staying healthy. Although I think if you start having liver problems, you'll probably start feeling sick and be able to tell that something is wrong. But still, if you can afford the tests, by all means, take them, How long did it take until you noticed feminization of your face and skin? Skin becomes softer pretty quickly, I would say 4 weeks, 2 months, and your skin is already softer, because skin regenerates really, really fast. In only a couple of weeks, the top layers of your skin are completely replaced. So as soon as you start taking estrogen, your skin turns into girl skin. That happens fairly quickly. That being said, your skin will also become thinner with time. Women have thinner skin. And that took a while to happen to me. It took a couple months, maybe 4 or 5 months to happen. But I noticed, that my skin was more transparent. That I could see some veins a little more, which is not something that I particularly like. Your skin's also more fragile, it'll bruise easier after some time. So yeah, I would say after 4 or 5 months, your skin is probably completely feminized. After maybe 1 or 2 months, it's going to feel softer. At least that was my case, but I think this is pretty universal. Okay, another interesting question. What do you think about the theory that male to female transsexuals' main motivation is the desire to be attractive to both sexes? This is a theory that's been proposed, I don't know how long ago, but it's pretty common. It's referred to as autogynephilia, I think, which is the theory that transsexuals exist in 2 types, that either transsexuals are essentially gay males who want to transition because they think that's the only way a man can be with a woman, or that you can be in a relationship with a man is to be a woman. And the other type of transsexuals are transsexuals that are basically turned on by themselves, so I become a woman because I'm going to be attracted to myself afterwards, to turn myself on, or something like that. What do I think about those theories? I think it's probably true of some people. Unfortunately, there's definitely gay people that think that being transsexual will make their life easier, that it will give them more validation, and that I think that's absolutely the wrong reason to transition. You will probably regret it. If you like having sex with a man using your penis, you'll find that hormones make your penis, much harder to use, and so you will probably get much less enjoyment out of it. And being transsexual, it's complicated. It's a lot easier to just be gay. So really, I think people should do a great deal of introspection and really think about what's the real reason behind the transition before you do it. As for the transsexuals that are attracted by themselves, well, there's definitely, quite a few cross-dressers that just push it too far out there, Some cross-dressers that really like being feminine, they find it's a big turn on, and they think that being transsexual is like the ultimate form of cross-dressing. And those people also, tend to not like it when they start hormones, because they will lose the male sex drive, and so it's not as much as a turn on as before, and all the fun is gone. So I think for the most part, those kinds of transsexuals get weeded out pretty early in the transition process, fortunately. There's still some that make the wrong choice out there. But I think, yeah, to some degree, maybe it's true of all transsexuals that, I like myself a lot better when I look in the mirror, and I think that I look feminine, and so I think it's normal, that I feel better about my body, and I feel more sexually turned on, when I feel more feminine, but if, of course, a sexual turn on is the only reason that you're transitioning, then you're probably transitioning for the wrong reasons, like I said. So again, I think it's a matter of introspection. But personally, I don't really care what the reason behind my transsexuality is. I just do it because I feel it's the only way I'm going to be happy in the end. So that is that. Whatever the reason is, I'm doing it because it's needed for me. And whatever people think, the reasons might be for transsexuality, I don't really care. I think people will always try to find reasons, find easy explanations, but they don't always work, And obviously, when people see transsexuals, they tend to say, "Oh, they're gay," or "Oh, they're cross-dressers," or they're crazy, But these people have no idea what's going on in their lives, don't really understand our perspective. And I think if you are confronted with a group of transsexuals, that are basically cross-dressers pushing it too far, maybe you shouldn't generalize too much and think, that this is the case for every transsexual out there. Okay, so next question. What is the difference between transgender people and transsexual people? Well, usually transgender is what people call an umbrella term. It means when you say transgender, you can be referring to a bunch of different things. So transsexuals basically fit within the transgender community, but the transgender community includes everybody that plays with gender, crossdressers, transvestites, gender queers, and transsexual people all fit within this bigger category of transgender. And you probably shouldn't use the term transgender to mean transsexual. I know some people are afraid of the term transsexual because, oh my god, there is sexual in that word. But, if you're transsexual, please say transsexual. We know that transsexuality is not just about your physical sex, but there's a pretty global understanding of what people mean by transsexual. But if you say transgender, people might think you're a crossdresser. Because I think when people say transgender in general, there's more of a perception that we're referring to like a cross-dressing person than a transsexual person. Next question. I know that if a man gets his stuff removed and vaginoplasty, that it makes him incontinent, or so I've heard. But I was wondering if M2F transgender sexuals still feel stuff happening in their new vagina. For example, can they orgasm? Do they produce fluids down there? Does sex feel the same, or do they have no feeling at all? Okay, so I have not had sexual reassignment, but I know that most transsexuals are able to orgasm after they had SRS, at least I believe so. A very big part of them. That being said, there are some transsexuals who can no longer orgasm after they had SRS. Either because the surgery was botched, they went to one of the less good surgeons, or the surgeon didn't do a very good job. There's also transsexuals that simply, haven't had any sex in so long that they just completely lost the notion of how to make themselves come. They were never comfortable masturbating when they had a penis, and they just have no technique, and they must relearn how to orgasm, and that takes some time after they've had a sex change. But if you go to one of the better surgeons like Dr. Saporn for SRS, your chances of being able to orgasm after are pretty good, especially if you are able to have an orgasm before you get the sex change. So I know a lot of transsexuals are afraid of touching their penis, but if you are able to come before SRS, that's a really good predictor of whether you're going to be able to come after you've had it. As for lubrication, well, girls, genetic girls produce lubrication when they are sexually excited. At least most of them do. But in the case of transsexuals, you just don't have the glands down there to do this. So I don't believe that transsexuals can produce lubrication after they have had SRS. That being said, I know some transsexuals would contradict me on this and say that, the skin down there will turn into vagina skin and start producing lubrication. I don't personally believe that's true. And I think if you are able to produce any kind of lubrication, maybe it's more like sweat actually that you're producing, and it's probably not going to be the same thing as lubrication produced by a genetic girl. I don't want to be a prejudiced here, but you must remember that sexual reassignment, you're not getting a real vagina, you're getting something that's cosmetic and that is hopefully sufficiently functional for you, but you're not getting the real thing, at least not in this day yet. Okay. I was wondering, how does one finally come to the realization that they're trans? Is it some gut feeling they can just go on without feeling like it needs thought? Or do they have to sort or wrestle their conscious thoughts or their subconscious? Okay. Well, some people will say it's a gut feeling. Some people will say they already knew since forever that they were meant to be a girl. I will say that in our society, it's not really accepted, especially for males to females. You know, when you're male, expressing your femininity here in America, it's not that accepted, you know. So a lot of transsexuals, you know, they just hide it from everybody, and they try to refuse thinking about it for years. You know, they do everything to be accepted as a normal male or a normal female if you're female to male, and it just doesn't work. And they don't really know, they don't really understand what's wrong because they've repressed it so much. Okay, so picking up where I left off, I think it's pretty natural if you're transsexual that you're not comfortable expressing it, you know, or that you don't realize it initially because you've repressed it for a long time. You've done everything you could to be accepted as a normal male or a normal female. And so, you know, it's normal that you be confused. And the only way to know that you're transsexual is that you feel a deep need to transition. And that this need is not just, you know, a sexual turn on for you. But I think the only way to really know if transition is for you is to try exploring your gender, you know. You go out dressed, you know, in the gender you desire to be perceived as. Maybe you try hormones for a little bit when you feel ready for that, you know. You read about the subject, you get in touch with other transsexuals, you know, and that's it. You just take it at your own pace, you know, and if you feel comfortable, if you find this brings you fulfillment, then, you know, you just keep going and you know that this is for you. But there is no definite answer, you know. There is no magic transsexual test that will tell you if you are or not. Okay, next question. Okay, how does one finally say, you know what, this is what I am, screw what anybody else thinks? If they are subconsciously trans, but consciously their mind worries that their family or friends might think, which if they have very conservative family is even worse, because this would lead to some people disowning them. Do some people never get over that? How can I start life anew, etc.? Okay, so basically you're asking me, I think, how do I get the courage to transition? I think it's pretty hard, you know, but courage, you know, there's no magic potion for that either. It's something that you just have to get by doing things, you know. You get the courage to transition by challenging yourself on a day-to-day basis. When I first when I first started exploring my gender, you know, just typing transsexual, you know, on Google was hard to do the first time. It took me a while to just pull off the courage to do that. I was afraid, what if someone found out I did this search, you know, and I was afraid of just doing that. But I did it because I felt the need to. And then at some point I wanted to order, you know, girls' clothes, and that was hard to do. So I ordered them on eBay, and just getting the courage to do that was hard, but I did it. And then going out as a girl was hard, and it took me a lot of courage to do it the first time, but now I've done it, you know, dozens of times, and it's a lot easier than it used to be. And then, you know, I used to go out only to gay clubs and easy places. Going to a straight club was very hard, but I did it eventually as well. You know, so you get courage by challenging yourself, you know, by coming out to the people who you think will accept you first, and progressively to the people who you think you might have more difficulty with. But, you know, to get courage, the only way to do it is really, you know, you have to realize, is this what I want, you know? And if you want this very bad, then you have to realize that you have to do what you have to do, and, you know, just challenge yourself to do it. That's it, you know. You can't just magically acquire it from one day to the next. But I think you'll find, you know, the more you challenge yourself, the more you do these things, the more you'll find there's nothing to be afraid of, and that you can do it, you can manage to do it and succeed. And then it'll become easier and easier to challenge yourself and to do the next thing you didn't dare to do. Next question. Have you yet started living full-time as a woman? The answer is no. If not, have you set a date or period of time in the future for taking this step? Are you planning to legally change your sex to female? No, I haven't set up an actual timetable. You know, I just take things progressively at my own pace. I think personally that's the healthiest way to transition. You know, you don't rush yourself. You don't force yourself into situations you don't feel comfortable with. You just progressively, you know, dress more feminine, do everything to be more feminine or more masculine if you're female to male. And you know, you just take your time, and at some point, you know, you start dressing up full time and you feel comfortable with it. But you can just dress, you know, progressively more feminine over time. Personally, I'm dressing particularly androgynous this time. But I plan to be full time, you know, after I've had my facial feminization surgery, because then I think I probably won't have a choice. Because I'm already starting to pass as female to some people. So when I have the surgery, I'll probably pass at least, you know, 95%, hopefully. And then, you know, I'll have no choice but to be full time. And probably start my PhD if I get funding as a female. As for changing my sex legally, well, here you can't do that unless you have the sex change. So if I don't do the sex change, then I won't do that. But I don't think changing my sex legally matters all that much right now to me, you know. I even know a transsexual who's post-op and who's been post-op for over a decade now and has not changed her sex legally, and doesn't seem to be any problem for her. So, you know, paperwork is not something I'm super interested in anyways. Do you speak French as a first language? Your English is quite good. Are most people in Montreal bilingual? I speak French as a first language, yes. This is why I have an accent. My English is quite good because I've been practicing it on the internet a lot. I think I learned most of it by chatting online with people, watching TV shows in English. As for most people in Montreal, yeah, you can totally live in Montreal if you only speak English. And I think most people are probably bilingual, but the degree of bilinguality is not the same in everybody. You know, some people have a pretty piss poor English, some people have a really poor French also. So it really depends on the person. Okay, next question. Have you heard a theory that holds that exposure to high amount of estrogen in utero creates male to female transgender people? Do you agree with it? Well, I talked about this theory in my video, The Causes of Transsexuality. I think it's one possibility, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily the possibility. I think there's many ways in which a transsexual can come into existence, you know. It's all in your brain, really, and I think there's many genes that could potentially be altered and result in you having a partially feminized brain. So the estrogen theory is not necessarily the only valid possibility. That being said, I think it just might be true, you know, because estrogen and testosterone clearly affect your development, and they do change the way in which the brain is formed. And there's some evidence for that theory, you know, there's been a pretty big amount of research into it. So I think it definitely has credibility. Whether I agree with it or not, you know, it's really hard to say, you know, without more research if this is definitely true. But I definitely don't think it's the case for every transsexual, you know, and that this is the only possible cause. Okay, next question. Your name sounds like a very good name for a boy or a girl to me. Once you transition full-time, are you planning to change your name? No, I'm not planning to change my name because it's a name that can be given to both boys and girls, although it's mainly given to boys here. I plan to keep it, you know, because it's simpler. And also, I guess, because I like, you know, to challenge people's assumptions a little bit, you know. Because people are probably going to keep referring to me as Max, you know, and someday I hope to be very passable and people will talk about this Max person and people will meet me and they'll be very surprised. And that's gonna be fun. Okay. Next question. You previously mentioned that you don't plan to have SRS for quite some time. I've seen in many other blogs that removal of the testicles is a common intermediate step after a person goes full-time before SRS. Are you considering this? Not at this time. Basically, I want to keep my options open. And I think, you know, removal of the testicles is obviously something that's entirely permanent. But when you're on hormones, you can stop hormones, you know, you can stop hormones. If you've been on them for 5 years, you can stop and have a pretty good degree, I think, of reversal. Breast growth can obviously be removed surgically. So basically, I'm going for a couple of years to keep my options completely open. If I ever want to stop my transition, I'll be able to. Why do I do this? Because it makes transition a lot less scary for me to know that if I don't feel comfortable with this 5 years down the road, I'm going to be able to just revert, to stop it. And right now I'm pretty comfortable with anti-androgens. You know, I think there's some decent ones out there, and it's possible to keep taking estrogen and anti-androgens for a long time. So I'm going to be doing that. Whether I'm going to be getting my testicles removed, well, once you do that, I think your penis becomes pretty useless, you know, so I won't do it unless I really plan definitely to get SRS, you know, and if I plan to get SRS, then I'll get SRS. I won't just get testicle removal. But no, for now it's not really something I'm planning to do. Next question. In your previous video, you mentioned that your mom was initially resistant but is now becoming more supportive of you in your transition. How have other family members reacted? I wouldn't really say my mom is supportive. I would say, you know, she understands that I'm 23 years old and I have rights. I have the rights to make my own decisions, because this is something, you know, that I upheld. You know, I told my mom, I'm an adult and you're not going to keep me from living my life, you know, the way I intend to. And if you're an adult and your parents are keeping you from transitioning, then I think you probably have something that you need to redefine in your relationship with your parents. Personally, she's a little bit more accepting, but mostly because I told her, you know, that this was off limits. I told her, you will not criticize anything I do relating to transition. She's been a little bit more helpful. I guess she's becoming a little more helpful, a little more accepting as time goes by, you know, but I think it's going to take a long time before she's fully accepting. As for other family members, well, unfortunately, my family is very distant, you know. The only other family member we have in Montreal is my aunt, and we only see her every Christmas. My uncle lives in a remote, small town, so we see him once every couple of years. So these people don't know just yet. But I think I'm going to tell my aunt, you know, maybe next Christmas, you know, I'm going to maybe announce it, maybe just go there dressed as a girl. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, my mom already told my aunt that Max likes female clothing, and she didn't seem too opposed to that, so I think it's already good progress. Okay, another question. Is Erin open to the idea of marrying you someday after you become a full-time female? Well, Erin and I don't really believe in marriage. I know gay marriage is a really hot topic right now, but let's face it, you know, the divorce rate is so high all over North America. Why would we want to marry? Why would we want to make that sort of commitment right now? You know, we're not gonna. She also doesn't really, she's an atheist, so she doesn't really like the idea of, you know, the Christian definition of marriage. If our relationship lasts, hopefully it will, then, you know, we might want to celebrate our union by, you know, taking a trip, having a honeymoon or something, you know, having some kind of ceremony with family members, maybe. But it probably won't be a Christian marriage, most definitely not. And we might not even do any paperwork, you know. Maybe if we stay together long enough, we could have like a civil union or something like that, you know, just so we can get the same legal benefits. But we're not actually planning for it. So far though, Erin is pretty comfortable with me and my transition, you know. Her friends have all met me, her mom has met me, her mom and her sister know about my situation, her friends know about my situation. So it's no big secret for the people she knows. And I think that's what matters, you know, that she accepts me and that she's not ashamed to be with me, and that she's comfortable with my transition. Okay, so next question. I wonder if the female hormones make you feel more sensitive. Does your skin and body get more sensitive? What about emotions? Do they change when starting to take hormones? Well, when I first started hormones, I didn't really notice any difference in things like pain sensitivity, for example. But when I stopped them, because I stopped hormones for 8 months, as most of you might know, to go to a fertility clinic. When I stopped them, I started to feel like my skin was much less sensitive, like it was anesthetized, and I think one of the things you'll find is that since your skin becomes thinner on estrogen, you're much more sensitive to touch. My girlfriend knows I'm pretty ticklish, and so yeah, I feel more sensitive to touch when I'm on estrogen. I didn't notice any difference in other senses. I feel more calm, emotionally speaking. And well, when I change my hormone dosage, I tend to get anxious, edgy, sort of like a PMSE kind of mood where I'm really irritable. So those are the kind of emotional changes I've experienced. I tend to cry easily when I see emotional scenes in movies, but that was pretty much always the case, I think. I was never one, to refrain from crying. My mom always told me, if you feel sad, then, let it out, cry. So I always did that, even before the hormones. So I don't feel massive emotional changes or anything, just calmer. And I don't know, it's possible that the hormones make me a little more empathetic to other people. I found that when I stopped hormones, I became less sensitive physically, but emotionally, I think I also found I cared a little bit less. I was a little bit more aggressive, in the kind of mood where, like when I just stopped hormones and I had like a rush of testosterone, I felt, almost like somebody could die, and I would be like, oh, that sucks. Oh. So I felt like emotionally, I felt maybe much less empathic when I stopped the hormones, but I think it's because I had a big testosterone rush at the time. And as my hormones settled back, I became more empathic, I think. So I think the emotional changes you can expect are maybe not that big. I think some people, like to say, oh, I'm so much more emotional now, I'm hormones, I cry all the time, blah, blah, blah. But I think the thing is that many transsexuals, that lived as a male for so many years, maybe they just didn't let themselves cry, they just wanted to prove they were masculine so much, they never let themselves have emotions. And now that they live as females, they're able to accept their own emotions more easily. Because I've heard a lot of older transsexuals say that, oh, now that I'm on hormones, I cry a lot. But I never hear that from younger transsexuals that start hormones. Just never. None of them have really talked about emotional changes to me. So I think it's mostly something, where like, if you've been trying to prove you're a man for decades, you maybe constructed a persona in which you never express your emotions. And transitioning makes it easier to express them. Okay, so that was the last question for today. If you got questions you'd like to ask me, you can just send me a message, put Q&A in the title of your message and send me your questions, and I'll probably make another of those question and answers video at some other point. If you'd like to comment on this video, feel free to do that, and I read all the comments. Okay, so that's it for today, and have a nice day. Goodbye.